Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Anlu, Keeve. Anlu, how are you doing?
Hello, Nicholas. I'm doing well, thank you. Good to be back.
Very good, very good. And we also have Chris Hattingh. Chris, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Nick. Anlu, doing well, thank you. Looking forward to our discussion today, especially continued shifts in our political landscape. We talk about radical shakeup. People thought what happened with MK over the last year was transformative to South African politics. Just wait.
Yeah, well, they wish. So, of course, what Chris is alluding to is our first story here, which is that the leader of the South African Communist Party has said that the party is going to be contesting the next local government elections in 2026 independently from the ANC. The party says that all the modalities of how exactly it's going to go alone in these elections will be thrashed out at its fifth special national conference in about 2 weeks. I think it's once before contested local government elections, or they've done it sort of here and there, but never to a serious degree. And for years, the SACP has threatened. They have threatened. They have threatened. They've said, no, the ANC is not listening to us. It's not a revolutionary organization. We're going to walk away. We're going to do this. And then they never do. At the last minute, they always say, actually, no, we've decided to endorse the ANC once again for yet another election. And that's probably because the SACP, I suspect very strongly, is not going to get particularly far in the country. I'm sure they can pick up probably some people who are unhappy with the EFF. They can pick up some disgruntled ANC members who don't like MK here and there. They can probably get themselves a couple seats all over the place, but they're not going to be some sort of gigantic titan in the electoral ring. Certainly, I don't think 5% of the party. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I was listening to an interview between the SACP and the SABC this morning, and there was much mention of the ANC being captured by imperialist forces, by which I think the SACP means the DA. So a lot of questions here. Anlu, let me start with you. I think there really seems to be this kind of growing divide between the ANC's leadership and the SACP. Do you think that it's actually going to result in a break between those two organizations? Is the tripartite alliance falling apart? Or are they just bluffing?
Well, I think the appropriate start is who are they again?
Sorry, Anlu, can you hold your mic up close to
who they are, but I'm just implying like.
No, sure. Can you hold your mic up closer to your
mic?
So
of course. Is it better now? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's as you said, we've seen this happen before. I think it was in 2017 when in the Free State they contested independently and they didn't get any seats. So I think we'll see that if they do go independently, we'll see that happen. Yeah, again, I think what caught my attention here is, and I don't know if this is a valid question to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Whether if they do stand independently and we see them ending up with few to no seats, what is the chances of them being included in the ANC's tripartite alliance for the next national election? And so the reason I'm asking that is the ANC Youth League, or president, he in response to their mention of wanting to run independently, said that if they want to contest the elections alone, they have to withdraw their deployees and test their strength. That's basically what it came down to. And I think what we pick up here is perhaps a sense of, well, I pick up at least a sense of sarcasm, but also, you know what, go do it. We'll turn our back to you at a later stage. And so the reason I'm asking the question is, if the ANC then says no down the line, what is the chances of them having pushed the ANC into a corner and being in a position where they can say, okay, but we're going with MK? I don't know if that's a valid question, but it's certainly something that came to mind when I thought about it. But for now, we'll have to see. It's in 2 weeks, I think. We'll all excitement to see what the independent campaign plan looks like.
Yeah, I must say I am skeptical that they will actually make the leap here, exactly for some of those reasons you point out. You know, what if they're independently contesting? Are they then going to have to give up their cushy positions and their massive overrepresentation within the ANC itself? You know, the SACP has very much been for a long time essentially a parasite which kind of lives off of the the ANC in many ways. Chris, what do you make of this? I mean, do you agree with me that the SACP wouldn't have a good chance in an election? I mean, I thought that MK would get, you know, maybe half of what it ended up getting. So I've definitely been wrong about this before. But you know, the leaders of the SACP are not quite the political juggernauts that Jacob Zuma is. What are your thoughts?
I think possibly one of the major issues for the SACP is just in terms of messaging and putting forth, proposals, ideas, etc., would have to be couched in that very revolutionary language. And you've seen in IRR polling, and confirmed, and I think reinforced by polling from other organizations, that South Africans broadly aren't that disposed or predisposed towards radical revolution. There's frustration with the status quo, and there's a desire for change, but not of the sort, for example, that the EFF has propounded. So that I think counts in the ANC's favor, where it does advocate for socialist ideas, but it does it in a way that's perceived, or at least felt, more comfortable about, more conservative, more sort of middle of the road kind of thing. It'll be a long-term change, not overthrowing the status quo overnight. So how do you shift that in terms of, you say the ANC is sold out, you want to propound these revolutionary ideals, you then have to communicate those. And if you communicate on those terms and you come up short or you fail in that regard, how then, where do you keep pushing the bar to? We've seen the issue in this regard for the EFF, where they've struggled to out-radicalize or radicalize themselves. That space has now been occupied by MK, and what does the EFF have left over to campaign on and build support on? So I share your skepticism, Nicholas, around whether the SACP will actually carry through this threat, and something else for them to keep in mind. If you make the same threat time after time after time, and you don't then follow through on it, it just undermines your own organizational standing. Maybe that's a broader comment also just for sort of labor unions and labor movements in South Africa over the last 10 years, losing quite a bit of their influence and impact. But it's partly largely due to their own, management issues, how they engage with workers, how they engage with business and with government. So I think the SACP could have some sort of role to play more broadly, but I just don't know if they're serious enough about doing the day-to-day work of building a campaign that would get them, what their specific target is in terms of in the next elections, what they would aim to attain, as it were.
I see Mike in the comments welcome me to Cape Town, saying he hopes I enjoy their traffic. It's the one thing about Cape Town I'm certainly not enjoying is traffic. So yeah, anyway, the SACP, I think, there is actually some merit if they did decide to actually, for real this time, no, really, guys, we're serious, to go it alone and run in an election, which is that if they could win some seats, they need to get rid of any illusions that they're going to, be the new EFF or something. I think that's way past the pale. I think a lot of the way the SACP talks, when you listen to it, it's like a Marxist academic from the 70s often, with like a whole bunch of cheap slogans. It really doesn't sound, I mean, that one interview I was listening to there was just imperialist forces this and social progressive transformation that, and it doesn't sound, I think, very appealing to ordinary people. But if you do get some seats, and if the country continues to be in so many places, particularly in local government, on kind of a knife's edge, there's lots of municipalities now around the country where you've got sort of the ANC and the EFF and the DA all, and sometimes the IFP as well, all kind of playing complicated coalition politics to see who actually gets to run these municipalities. And there, even having a few seats can actually get you a pretty strong negotiating seat at the table. Well, I think the SACP definitely has the opportunity to put itself in that position and actually have some sort of hard power. if they had 5 seats in parliament, they would be able to be in the GNU and they would presumably get a cabinet post. But the real question, I think, is their influence within the ANC actually done for? And I don't think that that's true yet. It remains to be seen, however, and I think the ANC is going through a period of convulsions. Is it going to change the way it's been doing things for the last couple of decades? Is it going to move away from the sort of far more radical politics? Is it going to go to a sort of more Mbeki-ite version of the ANC, which was, racial nationalist, but not nearly as dogmatic and inflexible and attached to all socialist ideas? Or is it just going to sort of stumble on in this incoherent mass? We don't know the answer to that question. I think that's the big question of our politics, one of them at least. Anlu, any final thoughts from you?
Well, the only thing I think I can add is that I think it will also give us a bit of separation between who in the tripartite alliance is it that is pushing many of the policies that we see them being a little bit behind the curtain about. And I think that would definitely be to our advantage, at least.
No, definitely. I agree with that completely. It would be nice for the ANC to be broken up into more coherent ideological blocks, rather than this sort of huge amorphous blob, which we don't really always know what they're exactly, what's on their minds. Okay, let's go on to our next topic. And this, I say, is very much also another, for me at least, good news story, which is that the Competition Commission seems to be having a bit of its comeuppance now. I think the Competition Commission has been a very negative influence on South Africa's trajectory as our economy's trajectory. It's often, I think, been irrational or misguided in some of its rulings. That's just my personal opinion. And the most recent controversy regarding the Competition Commission was that it was blocking Vodacom's 13 billion rand bid for Remgo's fiber assets. Well, after that was blocked by the Competition Commission, there has been quite a lot of backlash. Many in the media have described the decision as irrational, and we've even seen now the ANC Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, Parks Tau, saying that he's going to appeal this decision. The decision to appeal the ruling has actually even been supported by Vodacom's rival, MTN, who think that this is a bad idea for the Competition Commission to block this deal. Well, according to, I think it was Business Day, sources of the Competition Commission who spoke to, it's Business Times, this week said the four commissioners were split on the decision to block the Vodacom massive deal. They accused Chepe, the head of the Competition Commission, the chief economist who also serves as the acting deputy commissioner, of ramming through the ruling when other commissioners had disagreed, arguing that such a transaction would benefit the economy. A senior executive at the commission who asked not to be identified described the rulings as irrational, adding that public policy should prioritize comprehensive economic and social progress and that the implementation of competition policy should be integrated within the same framework. Our legislation is forward-thinking, explicitly incorporating considerations of industrial growth, job creation, and transformation into assessments made by the competition authorities regarding specific transactions. There's also been accusations leveled against the head of the Competition Commission, saying that she has been misspending money, that she's spending too much money on overseas flights and lavish events, that new cases were not being dealt with, that old cases were stuck at an investigation level and not referred for decisions. They wrote a letter actually to the presidency complaining about this, saying, quote, she loses this is people within the Competition Commission, she loses the moral high ground with her lavish ways, with international trips, internal staff meetings with catering, conference dinners, year-end functions. The events are becoming more elaborate, with alcohol purchased at the Commission's expense and venues booked for wedding-like events, all in complete disregard of the Public Financial Management Act and Treasury instructions. Well, Chris, do you share my enthusiasm for the difficulties that the Competition Commission seems to be in now? What do you make of this story?
Yeah, I think this is a bit of an underrated or underestimated benefit of the government of national unity, where there's more room for differences in terms of ideas around policy and legislation, which wouldn't have been the case before. So Minister Tao's predecessor, I think, would have, in this particular instance, been even, been encouraging the Competition Commission and the Competition Tribunal to be even more harsh if they were to accept the deal, but then push for more stringent quote-unquote transformation requirements or investment requirements. So I'm, of course, talking about former Minister Ibrahim Patel. So here we already see that the departments and the authorities that fall under their ambit, as is the case here with the Commission, the Tribunal, and the DTIC, it's not just assumed now that they're all going to be in lockstep with each other, and indeed in lockstep with a particular political party. I'm not saying it's going to be that's going to be the case in the majority of instances. It will still largely probably follow party lines. But this just, again, shifts a little bit that Overton window of what's acceptable, different debates, different ideas, and slowly but surely over time you shift it towards a more, hopefully a more pro-growth sort of situation in terms of how deals and mergers are seen, how legislation is formed, how policies are put in place, etc. I think it's also interesting just to note that Minister Tao, he made sure to lodge his appeal before the deadline. So it's a case of disagreeing, but still following the right sort of the accepted procedures and things. So just do things by the book, but use the room that you do have to push back if there are entities under your authority with which you disagree. If he did it maybe in a way, a sort of shotgun approach, then it undermines his own, I think, the seriousness with which the department and those in the department would take him. But it seems like he's doing things as much by the book as he can.
No, I think that's a very good point. It's important when you're dealing with bureaucratic disputes and political disputes to be able to use the systems in place effectively rather than just decreeing on high and then expecting something to happen magically. So I think that's a very good point that you make there, Chris. Anlu, any thoughts on this one?
Sorry, I saw myself. Today we don't have camera issues, we have mic issues, but I'm back.
Happens to all of us.
Happens more often to me, but anyway. So I think what Chris said is, I just want to emphasize the point by saying that we see this playing out by having the ministry appeal the decisions and the entities being able to provide a space where we can have these conversations and these debates about what needs to be put through. And then the overarching idea here is that I think, well, before I get to the Competition Commission itself, is that South Africa is in a desperate need for investment. And whatever there is that is being pushed through that could potentially break the trust and the assurance to investors that South Africa is actually open for investment, it should be off the table. And I'm happy to see that we have now at least a space to say this and to at least have a conversation about what it is that could potentially break the trust. And then just about the Competition Commission, I saw this in the comment as well, but I think it's such an important point that it's perhaps a little bit too much to ask, but the moment you're being politically motivated, we start seeing issues like these. And I think it's important to point the finger to that and identify it as the issue. And then another very serious concern that I got from reading this, and I think that emphasizes to us that there is productivity issues within the commission, is that they were late on an August deadline for an annual report. And although they submitted at a later stage, I understand that, but it points to the fact that they're inefficient and they're unproductive. And whether it's likely because she were on her overseas trips, it's possible. But I think there's no space to have these type of unproductiveness or inefficiencies, especially not if we're dealing with South Africa on a national level and investment and the potential for more investment to be taken out of the country. That's my 2 cents.
No, I think what's often not appreciated fully about South Africa's hostility to investment is often tools like the Competition Commission or sometimes bureaucrats within the departments are in many ways the biggest obstacles, I think, to growth. It's not just the bad policy. The bad policy is definitely, what creates the space for people to interrupt investment and to attack investors. But very often you'll find like department officials dragging their feet at the granting of a license for something because they're basically trying to get a bribe out of someone. You find ideologues in departments enforcing very stringent BE quotas, even sometimes beyond what sort of anyone would expect of them. You find cases like this where you have like the Competition Commission issuing rulings which everyone else kind of scratches their head at for whether it was actually a good idea or not, probably for ideological purposes. And at the end of the day, you just have a business. You have in South Africa kind of the worst of all worlds. In a first world country like, I don't know, let's say Australia, for example, you have to pay high wages. You have to follow lots of regulations. There's all sorts of things that gum up the works there. But at the very least, you get very stable, dependable, reliable government that you can predict. And the country like DRC, it's just the complete Wild West. There's basically no rules. You can do what you like as long as you have the right people on side. But the downside of that is just, total insecurity of your investments. While South Africa combines the regulatory fist control and micromanagement of Australia with the unpredictability of the DRC. And that's exactly why South Africa is one of the places in the world which has had such weak economic growth over the past couple of years. Chris, any final thoughts?
Just to pinpoint a specific piece in legislation where I think the Competition Commission has largely overstepped its bounds. So if you look at the so-called public interest clause of the Competition Act, where public interest has been very widely interpreted and defined. So when you've got legislation and regulations that are so widely interpreted to effectively mean nothing, then it just becomes a case of what your ideological predilection happens to be as a politician or a bureaucrat. And then that undermines the sort of commission itself, the authority itself, if there are issues around monopolies, that sort of the issues around competition, which could also help explain why you never hear the Competition Commission talking about the monopolies that are Eskom and Transnet, but they worry about quote-unquote monopolies in freer sectors or freer markets. All of these things, I think, filter into each other. So I'm not expecting all of this to be upended overnight, but it does start to shift the needle somewhat. So all in all, I think a good sign here in December.
Yeah, and I think it's key that wherever possible, ministers in government who are serious about economic growth find these officials, these senior officials who stand in the way of things, find these institutions where you have people who are acting against the interests of the country, and do proper performance reviews on them. Say, are these officials actually doing their job, or are they just wrecking our economy for their own reasons? And I think in many cases, you'll find that a lot of the officials who are responsible for these poor decisions are also probably not doing their jobs. And it looks a lot like that may be the case in the Competition Commission's example, where the commissioner is perhaps not spending the commission's money as she should be. Okay. Let's go on to our last story. And Chris, when you sent this story to me, I just couldn't stop laughing. It was so silly. The city of Johannesburg, as it's been revealed, so if anyone's been following the news about Joburg will know that Johannesburg has moved, city officials have moved mostly out of the Johannesburg Metro Center and are now renting properties around the city, some from the Johannesburg Property Company, but many from businessmen who seem to be affiliated with the ANC. In one of the cases, the Joburg mayor's new offices that they are renting from what the Daily Maverick describes as a cadre of the ANC, an ANC-aligned property mogul. Apparently, the property owner did not pay the electricity and water bill, so the city of Joburg cut off the offices of the mayor from the water and power grids. It's like, and this has been going on apparently since September. In fact, they've not been able to do their work properly in the city there. It is just the perfect microcosm of the incompetence and self-interested, corrupt double dealings that has really caused huge damage to Joburg. I mean, like the mayor's office itself can't even get water and electricity without being cut off. Although, on the other hand, I am very glad to see that political protection was not provided in this particular case on the bill. So I guess that's a good side to this. If the city was even more corrupt, maybe the mayor would have just ignored had the city ignore the bill for the property he was renting. But anyway. This happened in September 24, where Bayete Capital, who are the company who the city is renting these offices from, was part of the targeted customers, paid a substantial amount to reduce its debt, and that the company is apparently paying its current debt, despite, for a time, not paying its utility bills. Chris, I don't even know what to say here. Like, what more example could you get of the mismanagement of Joburg in this case?
And all of this in the context where, as of yesterday, as of the 1st of December, South Africa assumed the presidency of the G20. Next year, November, South Africa hosts the G20 summit in Johannesburg.
And Pretoria.
No more, I mean, some street lines will be painted, some street lights will be fixed, but it's going to be very difficult to hide, I think, the decline to which politicians have subjected Johannesburg. And when investors compare Johannesburg to other cities and other provinces around the country and ask, well, what are the issues that drove this? Did this just happen in a vacuum? No, it's the consequence of the decisions by the politicians that govern that particular city. I should also just add, in August, Bloomberg reported that the city of Joburg estimated that it needs around 221 billion rand to catch up on maintenance and overdue upgrades across its collapsing road, power and water networks. So 221 billion versus how much is being used on however many properties the city of Joburg is supposed to have, however many mayoral offices. For residents and businesses in Johannesburg, when your water supply fails, when your electricity supply fails, don't be caught off guard by that sort of thing. There just isn't the necessary attention and building up of investment and maintenance. The priorities of the politicians are very different from what the priorities are for businesses and residents in Johannesburg.
I think Joburg for a long time was not that well run. In fact, for a time, but it was better run than it is now. For a time, the mayor of the city was Parks Tau, who is now the Minister of Trade and Industry. Not an amazing mayor, but not the worst mayor ever, that's for sure. So the city definitely decayed a bit and had problems, but it was sort of okay. And then we had the government of Mashaba, and when the DA and a coalition briefly ran the city of Joburg. I was there for a bit as a councillor, saw some of that up hand. I don't think that up close, that didn't really go that well. And then things kind of got wacky. Eventually, we had the changing back and forth between the DA and ANC coalitions. And then we had the EFF-ANC coalition take control in the city. And man, since then, kind of the sort of 2021, 2022, it really seems as though all the brakes have come off on the mismanagement train, and the city has just become almost an extractive enterprise to get out as much money as possible into the hands of politically connected cadres. At least that's the impression I got. I really think the city of Joburg is in big trouble right now. Anlu, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it can be summarized what you said in simply saying that the city is being run into the ground by incompetence and corruption. And I think we are in a privileged but very unprivileged position to live in a time when we see what happens and we see the consequences of it as well. We see how it plays out. And that's exactly what happened here. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he moved into the offices without council approval even, which, yeah, it's just another layer to this rotting onion. And I think it's a good example of one of the cases where when you get into, this is probably not podcast appropriate, but when you get into bed with the wrong friends, it doesn't work out good. And I mean, we had last week, last month, well, it's technically last week as well. We had the mayor saying that the metro doesn't have the money, or they don't have enough funds to actually fix the leaks. And he assured the councillors that the municipality had plans to address the water issues. And now he's in the position where his office, I understand that it's obviously the people who he's renting from, but his office didn't they didn't pay their debt. And we know very well that the leaks, there's no money to fix the leaks because of outstanding payments. So it is a good case in point, a very clear play out of what happens when you take 2 steps to the left instead of taking them forward. Pun intended.
Exactly. Still, I wonder, I'm sure, I still think that Dada Moreira is a better mayor than Kabelo Gomanda, but anyway. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, just to add something maybe to keep in mind for December. So as of yesterday, as of the 1st of December, Eskom indicated that viewers will recall last month there was this dispute between City Power and Eskom around money owed to Eskom by City Power. So as of yesterday, the 1st of December, Eskom says that the 1.4 billion rand allegedly paid to its account by City Power has not yet reflected in the account. So let's see what happens in December. I will leave us with that.
Oh man, you see, this is why I moved out of Joburg. I'm so sorry to everyone who's still stuck there. Anyway, I really hope that gets resolved. I'm sure it will be eventually. I don't think Eskom. I think the political pressure on Eskom to not cut Joburg off is going to be too high. But still, it's scary to think that the city is in that position now. Anyway. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the show. This is the last long format show that's not a special for the year. Our final episode will be a Daily Friend wrap on Wednesday, but I am recording a special today, and there is one that Sargon did about free speech issues that should be going up relatively soon. So anyway, keep tuned for those 2 special editions of the Daily Friend show. Yeah, we will see you all soon on the Daily Friend show. Cheers, everyone.